So problem 10, yeah, so this is like a pretty standard question, right? So this is like an algebra question. So in this question, you have like, suppose that a and b are non-zero real numbers and that the equation x squared plus ax plus b equals 0 has solutions a and b. Want to find what is the pair a comma b. So basically, like, there are two ways to do this problem, I think, but like, I guess I'll just show the easier way. So basically, there's something called like Vieta's formulas, which is like a very like important like kind of algebra trick you can use, which is that like if you have like some like quadratic, like in this case they gave us the expression x squared plus ax plus b, right? It turns out like if you have like roots, like if like let's say R1 and R2 are like solutions to this like equation x squared plus ax plus b equals 0, it turns out like there's something called Vieta's formulas, which tells us that the sum of the two roots, so like the sum of the solutions to this like equation is negative of this coefficient, so is equal to negative a, and the product of the roots R1 times R2 is equal to this constant term b. So this is what we call like Vieta's formulas. And like in this case, you can kind of use this to our advantage. So like, I guess like if you wanted to explain why this was true, right? There's a pretty easy explanation on why this is true. Because if you have x squared plus ax plus b, if R1 and R2 are like solutions to this equation, then we can kind of think of like this quadratic, we can factor it as x minus R1 times x minus R2, right? Because like when x equals R1, this expression equals 0. When x equals R2, that expression also equals 0, which is like, yeah. So then like if you were to expand like this right side here, you would get like, if you distribute the x times the x times the minus R2, so minus R2 times x, this minus R1 times x, so minus R1x, and this minus R1 times minus R2 is plus R1 R2. So like we can kind of group these two middle terms together as like x squared minus R1 plus R2 times x plus R1 R2. So that's kind of how we derive the formula, right? Because now we can compare coefficients. This negative R1 plus R2 has to correspond to this plus A, and this like plus R1 R2 has to correspond to this plus B, which is kind of how we got like these formulas here up top. And those are like what we call Vieta's formulas. It essentially tells us that the sum of the solutions to like this kind of quadratic equals like the negative of this x term, the coefficient of the x term, and the product of the two solutions is equal to the constant term. So that's like Vieta's formulas. So if we were to use that in this case, we have that x squared plus ax plus b has solutions a and b. So in this case, our R1 and our R2 are equal to our a and a b. So we know that the sum of the roots, a plus b, has to equal negative a, and a times b has to equal b by Vieta's formulas, just like from these equations. So like now all we have to do is like solve this system of equations, right? So the idea is you can first look at this second equation, like ab equals b. So like there are two possibilities. Like first, if you have ab equals b, so let me write the equations like down here. So like you have a plus b is like negative a, and like a times b equals b. So from this second equation, if b is like equal to 0, like if b from this equation, if b equals 0, like that's technically possible, but like the original problem said like a and b are non-zero real numbers, right? So like b like can't be 0. So that means we can like kind of divide both sides by b. So that cancels, and then we get like a equals 1. So then if a equals 1, you can like plug that back into that first equation. So 1 plus b equals negative 1. So then you from there you get b equals negative 2. And the question wanted, what is the ordered pair a comma b? So the answer is 1 comma negative 2. And that would give you like choice C, which is the right answer. So like if you didn't know like Vieta's formulas, let's say like you didn't know that like Vieta's formulas, you didn't know this trick, there's like technically another way you could do it, right? Which is like you have the equation x squared plus ax plus b equals 0, and we know that like a and b are solutions. So if a and b are solutions, that means like if we substitute x equals a and we substitute x equals b, then we're gonna get like that expression equals 0. So if we were to plug in x equals a, right, then we would get a squared plus b equals 0. And if we were to substitute like x equals b into the equation, we would get like b squared plus ab plus b equals 0. So alternatively, you can get like these two equations, and you can try solving those two equations. So like just this is another way to do it, right? So from the first equation, you can kind of combine. You get 2a squared plus b equals 0. And then from this like second equation, you can kind of factor out a b. So b times b plus a plus 1 equals 0. Again, we know that b can't be 0, right? Because like the question told us that a and b are non-zero. So that tells us b plus a plus 1 has to be 0. And then from there, we get that b equals negative a minus 1. So we can kind of use substitution and substitute this b into here. And then we would get like 2a squared minus a minus 1 equals 0. And then from here, you can kind of use inspection. We can kind of see, oh, we can notice that a equals 1 is a solution, right? Like if we were to plug in a equals 1, you would get 2 times 1 squared minus 1, and that like gives you 0. So a equals 1 is a solution. And since b equals negative a minus 1, you get that like b equals negative 1 minus 1, which is negative 2. So like that's also like another way you can kind of do the problem. Either way, you would get like the same answer. Yeah, so hopefully that made sense. So the idea was like, so first, just to like quickly go over it again, right? There's one trick you can use called Vieta's formulas. In this case, we know Vieta's formulas is like a trick that tells us that there's two solutions to a quadratic. The sum of those solutions is equal to the negative of the coefficient of the x term. And the product of the two solutions is equal to the constant term, which is like the formula there. And we know that the two solutions are a and b. So that's how we were able to get these two equations over here using Vieta's formulas that we just talked about. And then that way from there, we can just solve the equations. The other way you could do it was like, we know that a and b are solutions, right, to that equation. So that means if we were to substitute x equals a and x equals b into the equation, then like it would work. So we did that. And then we kind of just like also did it that way. Like, again, we got two equations, two variables, but like, you know, it's like a different way of solving it.